Okay, so continuing our previous discussion about getting references off of the internet. In the previous video, I used Web of Science and Google Scholar, and I downloaded a bunch of different articles. So first I want to say that EndNote has two components, and I use EndNote to organize the vast majority of my research. I never not use EndNote. I always use EndNote unless the person I'm working with doesn't, and even in that case I use EndNote and I just convert everything to static text when I'm done. And I'll explain that in just a second. So this is my online EndNote. So EndNote can sync, which means it can sync across multiple devices and it can be accessible wherever you go. And you don't have to have EndNote desktop or your EndNote desktop tied to use EndNote, if that makes sense. So let's say you were at the library using one of the library computers. They all have EndNote installed and they all have the Microsoft Word extension. And so you could hook up temporarily your Microsoft Word there to your EndNote web and still have access to all of your references. I actually have to do this a lot, and I'll explain that in just a second, but I showed you in class that I had a bunch of folders and subfolders, and that I've amassed, I don't know, 1,300 of these resources. And so in class I showed you my full EndNote library on my desktop on a Mac, and because I have a lab computer and an office computer and then a laptop that I take home with me, and I do my same research across all of them, I have these synced to EndNote Web so that when I get onto whatever computer I can open EndNote and it syncs automatically, and then I can have the same references available to me no matter what. The reason I don't like using EndNote Web is because it doesn't allow you to have subfolders. So when you saw my EndNote library before, it was organized into groups and subgroups, and that helps me sort through all this. But this is kind of a hot mess, and all of my different categories. What you'll notice in EndNote Web, though, is that right here you have these little people attached to them, and it means that I've shared this group with other people. And whether those other people use it, a whole different story, but you can still access all of these references here, but you can also share them with other people. And I think that is in the, I don't use this very often. You can also upload your references in the same way that I was doing in the previous video, where I just clicked on them and they open in EndNote Desktop. You can also upload them directly to EndNote Web. So let's say you're on the library computer, you've gotten a bunch of citation files from Google Scholar and you want to put them in your EndNote, you can still import references here. So if you go to import references in EndNote online, you can still pick the files. You have to specify that it's an EndNote. And if you don't know, so if it doesn't end in ENW as a file name, but it ends in something else, this RIS format almost always works for me. So this refman RIS, I don't know why, I think it's more general. I don't know the technical details of it, but you can also specify where you want to upload those references to if you're keeping folders like I do. You can see here, these are my groups, and this is where you can see all the people who have access to it. So this is my research partner, and I can add more people if I want to. I can add their email addresses, and I can choose if they're allowed to just read these references or if they can read and change them. Be aware of that because people can also accidentally delete your stuff. So usually if I'm just trying to give somebody visibility, I let them read them. And you can see down here at the bottom I have, whoops, this is not showing anymore. Some of these are libraries that people have shared with me. And so, I don't know where they went, sorry, but yeah, you can manage who you want to share it with, which is nice if you're sharing across groups. And don't worry about it too much though. If you are all working in a Word document, Microsoft Word manages a traveling what do they call it? A traveling library. And so you can actually access their references as long as they're already in the paper in EndNote file, in EndNote format. And I'll show you that in just a minute. So first, I prefer to work off EndNote desktop for the reason I said before, that I can organize these into groups and subgroups. And so you can see right now I'm working on a publication with my student, and this is my work laptop, and I actually disconnected the sync from my EndNote web because I think I had too many, there's probably some fine print somewhere. I think I had too many computers, or too many different types of computers. I had 2 PCs and a Mac, 2 Macs, I guess, hooked up to my same EndNote library, and it started causing this problem with duplicates. So right now I'm just working off a sub-library, and these are just, you can see there's like 3 proposals here, and this paper that I'm working on. And one thing that's useful to note is here I have this Mackenzie spelled wrong paper, which has 54 references, and this one here. These are mine, and these are the ones that I downloaded from her paper. So inside of her paper, she had been using EndNote, and I extracted her library into mine so that I could actually manipulate some of these references myself, add notes or whatever I wanted to do. So to sync this, and mine does not sync, if you recall. I think this is different in the Mac version, I'm not sure, but in Edit there's a preferences thing here. And there are a few things that you can do with preferences to make your life a little bit easier. One is that you can enable sync and put in your online credentials here. And I have this so that it's not actually syncing. The other thing that you can do that I do is here's the PDF handling. And when you upload your video, so you've probably noticed that when you download a PDF from a website, like a journal, that the title isn't necessarily what you want it to be. It's like this long string of numbers, and that's not really helpful for me in terms of storage. So I usually rename them, but what I learned a few years ago is that EndNote can actually rename it for you when you upload it to EndNote. So I usually change it to author title year, and that lets me have these PDFs get uploaded and already named in a way, so when I download them, they actually have that name when I download them from EndNote. And I believe this is where you can reorder these fields. So I mentioned this in class, but right now I have column 1 as the read unread. This is my preferred format. And I set column 2 to file attachments, author, year, the title of the article, and then I like to have rating, but you don't actually have to have it up here. You can just change it to something else. There's lots of other fields, or you could have nothing. So you could move these up and change it to do not display. So you don't have to have all of these. And so you can change this to suit your needs. So mine, that's okay. No, don't do this. So it's mad because I don't want to sync my libraries. Okay, so I explained this in class, but basically what I do is when I'm going to do something, so this is a proposal that I wrote in the spring, and some of this is stuff I don't know anything about. And so what I did is I mined the internet using Google Scholar and Web of Science. And what I do is I spend 1 day or 2 days and I just search for things. So I keep track of the search terms on paper. I mentioned I use Post-it notes on paper, and I just spend 1 or 2 days just like kind of combing through the literature broadly. I never look deep. I just put a bunch of stuff into EndNote. And then I have all these things that I've dumped in here. I try to put them in a folder so that because I have a lot of projects going on at one time, and you have a lot of papers going on at one time, so you could have your conflict and cooperation class, just throw all the things for that paper in there. And then I spend a day or two and I just go through the articles themselves. And what I mean by that is that normally this is actually a news article, so that's not a good one, but I try to download them in a way that includes the abstract. And if it doesn't, I try to copy and paste it in there. And so when I say I make my first pass, all I do is download things that look like they might be interesting. So I've maybe looked at the title and skimmed the abstract, and I'm like, that looks pretty good. And I generally look at the title of the journal and see if it kind of looks legit or not. It's hard to tell sometimes. And so I just throw all of them in EndNote. That's phase one. Phase two is then I go through each of these and I carefully read the abstract and I sort them into what topic folder I think they might be in. So you can see here the paper that I'm working on with my student. I have 3 broad topic areas where I've put some things that I'm looking at, if that makes sense. Now, I mentioned that there are 2 sections here called notes and research notes. And my system, and this does not have to be your system, my system is that anything I put in notes is an exact quote. Even if there aren't quotation marks around it, even if I make a mistake and it's not actually an exact quote, I take anything in the notes section to be directly taken from the article. And that is so that I don't accidentally plagiarize. And it's really easy when you're taking notes on articles to plagiarize because you get tired and it's easy to make mistakes and not know that that was actually a quote and you just think it was your brilliant words. When it was actually a quote, anything I put for myself here as I'm reading the article, I consider to be this sacred from the article directly section. Even if it's paraphrased, I assume it's too closely paraphrased to count as not plagiarism. Usually I try to put quotation marks and page numbers in. And the research notes are the notes that I write to myself. So I'll write things like, this article really pertains to this particular aspect of getting technology to women in Bangladesh so that they can report gender-based violence. And I'm just trying to make notes because I forget things, and I'm sure your memory is better than mine, but I forget things that I've read, and I forget why I read them and why I thought it was so important. And this helps me go back through and skim. When I knew I read that thing that said the really good thing, I try to write those really good things in the research notes section for myself. The other thing I try to add to is keywords. And some of these populate with keywords, but I would always add more to the bottom. So for instance, if you are doing something for cooperation and conflict class right now, and you would write cooperation and conflict as one of the keywords, but you could also write something like dissertation because it's a topic that really interests you and you think you might look to later, and it'll help you search for it later. Because dissertation is not going to come up in a search of this abstract, obviously, but it might help you filter later. The other thing I do is after I've finished reading this, my first read is usually a pretty quick skim. I mentioned this in class, but I read the title, I read the abstract really carefully. I usually read the introduction, I skim the methods, the conclusions, and I look at all the section headers and decide if it looks like it's going to be useful as central literature or not even useful at all. And then I rate it. And this is not something that you have to do, and I don't even think this is how it's supposed to be used, but basically, this isn't about how good I think the article was. It's about how good I think the article was for my purpose. There are great articles that I find, but they have nothing to do with what I'm writing about, or they're just so tangential to what I'm writing that this is not a reflection of how I think the article was in terms of its level of, academic, whatever, contributions. It's really just about me. So this is my selfish rating system that tells me for this purpose, for this particular proposal that I was writing, and I didn't write these because I was writing this in a hurry, but, this is just a 2. I'm not actually going to use this article, but not that it's not a good read, it just isn't good for the purpose that I'm doing. So the other thing I want to mention is that EndNote can actually, and all of these have actual URLs, but let's pretend it doesn't. EndNote can look for those for you. So if you go to the References tab and go down here, there's a Find Full Text option, and it can look for these. You'll see it searching, and it says it did actually find the PDF, probably because I'm logged into the OD libraries right now. And so you can see here, it added that PDF where I didn't have one before. So this is something that's nice when you go back. You filtered these into their various folders, and so you know you're for sure going to use these, that you can then select all of these. So I'm going to click the first one and then shift click the last one Excel tips work everywhere. And then I can find the full text here. Now, I probably won't be able to find the full text for all of them, but it did find a URL for a few of them, and then it has one that's not found. So that's not surprising. These are some of them locked behind walls. And so I didn't actually add any new PDFs this time. That doesn't happen so often. But then you could go through and you'd have the URLs in case they didn't come up. So here I have the URL and the attachment. And so the other thing I do is when I'm in this folder, because remember this is a folder, let's say I haven't read yet, I just stashed all of this is my second phase where I've sorted all of my EndNote references. As I read it, I will mark it. So what I usually use the ratings for is that I rate them based on how I think they fit with my particular journal article or proposal. And then when I insert it into the paper, I mark it as used. Because I don't always get through all of them. And I mean, you obviously write in phases, probably like me. And so, you know, you can come back to it and know which of these articles you've actually gone through and inserted into your research and which ones you haven't. So I find that to be really helpful. The other thing that EndNote gives you in the references section is that you can, down here, find duplicates. And duplicates looks across all of your references. I actually did find a duplicate I was going to show you. I think it's right here. It won't find them if they're not exact duplicates, but you can see here I have two of this Noonan Camp Peter reference. And so I can find the duplicates here, and it's like, hey, you have these two that are exactly the same. Which one should I keep? And if you scroll through, you'll see these are actually exactly the same. I don't know why they're both in here. But what EndNote will do for you if they're not exactly the same, so let's say I had started putting research notes in one of these and not the other one, it'll highlight the sections that are different in blue. So that you can quickly scan through these and say, okay, this is the one that I added stuff to, so I'm going to keep this record. And then it just consolidates them and deletes the other one. All records that you import into EndNote go, unless you specify in the EndNote web thing, they go into this unfiled one. So I actually see that there's a duplicate here too. You can do one massive duplicate thing just by going to the full references tab. So if you did the duplicate look here, it'll look through all of your references. So if you recall from my lecture, one of the things about this EndNote library is that this all references is sacred. If you delete something out of one of these bins, it does not delete it from this main library. If you delete it from this bin, it just deletes it from the bin. So let's say I'm in this network resilience part of my journal article, and I hate this one. It doesn't have anything to do with it, with this particular journal article, but it's a good article and I want to keep it in my library. I can delete it from here and it'll still remain in the references section. If I delete from this references section, then it is gone forever. So that is this is the sacred primary library. And I also mentioned, and I'll do this in the unfiled ones because I don't like things to be unfiled, that you can multiply drag these into different papers. And so here I have this, this article, and let's say this is really related to my SIGS research, and now it's unfiled, so that was a bad example. Where do you go? T. The nice thing about having a smaller library is there aren't that many things to look for. So here he is. This 2-borough one I just put in my SIGS library, but also was relevant to the NSF career proposal that I wrote. And so you can multiply drag these because this main all references library is the sacred one, but these can have overlap between them, which is why I find them really valuable for organizing for a paper, because you'll write papers that use the same resources over and over again. And some of those papers, like journal articles or dissertation chapters, you're going to have to come back to again and again. And so it's not helpful to put everything in there and then delete it when it's done. You may need to revise your journal article. And so it's nice to be able to go in and say, okay, here's everything we used for this paper that we wrote together. and I can see what's in here. I can change some of them. I can add to it. So I always have a record of all the references that went into that paper. And this is how EndNote becomes my superpower, because you'll find as you start writing more that you tend to write on the same things. And so when somebody asks you, hey, can you write a section on, you know, women in technology, I already have 32 references in here, most of which I'm relatively familiar with. I don't have to recall in my brain, which has limited power, where that reference was that I saw that was so good about the, you know, minimum standards for mainstreaming gender equality. I'm never going to find that. I read so many things all the time. And so this helps me focus really quickly, and it basically takes care of most of stage one, that going to the internet where you fall down the rabbit hole and you're trying to pull out references that you're going to use for your paper and everything looks amazing at the moment. This can help me focus so that I don't do that. I only go reach out to EndNote or to Google Scholar if I feel like something's missing, and I can quickly rewrite something. So I regularly refresh these, but I don't go back and delete any of my old folders. I'm sure I should at some point, but that's completely up to you. So basically, that is how I use EndNote. One way that you can share these, I'm going to use a smaller one. You can share these references with your classmates who aren't using EndNote I'm going to click on the first one and then shift click the last one so I select the whole list. And if you go to, actually I think I can right click, you can copy formatted, and then you can open a Word document and paste it in. And what I have is the reference and the abstract. Now, yours may not be set up to do that. If you go to references, you can check if that's true. Oh no, I just forgot where it goes. I think you have to update the version, oh, it's right here, sorry. Right here in this window, and it's in a slightly different place on a Mac, but it is up here somewhere, is the style that I'm using right now. So if I wanted to copy and paste those out with their abstracts to share with somebody, then I can use this annotated format. Otherwise, you can use whatever format style you're planning to put into your article and copy and paste them. So now I'm on APA. If I did the same copy format and I put them into a new Word document, and you'll see there's no abstracts, and now it's in APA. So whatever this bin is set to is how things are being copied out and how they're being annotated. And you can see that in the preview window right here. So I'm in annotated, and you can see that there's an abstract here. And if I switch that to APA, you can see now it's in APA format. Okay. And I can't remember all the questions that you guys asked me, I'm sorry. But let me just show you again really quickly how to put these into a Word document. And just in case you've ever wondered, since you like my tips and tricks, if you Control N in a Word document, it just makes a new one for you automatically. So I'm going to blah, 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 and add something from my EndNote library. You'll notice here after you've installed EndNote that there's an EndNote add-in tab. And this EndNote add-in tab has the same thing here. So I can choose which kind I want to use. And if you're working in a particular journal style, you can select another style, and you'll see that there are like tons of these. Very specific ones for every journal you could ever think of. And this is why I think EndNote is really powerful, because I cannot possibly know all of these different citation style formats, and I've had to use like one different one for everything I've ever written. If it's not in this bin, then you can actually go to the journal website. So I would search that journal or that conference, and you would search for EndNote style guide or style, EndNote style, and you can often download a file that you can put in to EndNote, and it'll read that for you. So if I have all this in, you'll see right now I have that instant formatting is off, and generally you don't want that. You want to put it on, and in my preferences, this is where you can sort of change the syncing and how it does all this stuff. And so this is where in the application section of preferences where you would change to EndNote Web. So I mentioned that I don't have this computer synced, so my library doesn't sync, and that's because I have that problem with duplicates. And so I could actually switch this in Word to Microsoft or to EndNote Online. And then when I search my references, it's actually searching not my local library, not this one here. It won't let me use this one. It's actually just using the one that's online. I don't want that right now because I want it to be faster. It takes a little bit of time, so I'm just going to use EndNote for the desktop. And so here, you can go to Insert a Citation, and I'll just pick this one. And I think this is true on both the Mac and the PC. I can't remember. You can change this the way that it's displayed. And so display author year says something like, and this is a terrible example, it has the authors, right? Parentheses year. Instead of this version of the citation, which is just regular, and that's the last names, comma, year. So you can add these together and do them in different formats. And let's say you get in here and you're like, oh, I need to add the pages. So I actually got this quote from page 23. I can add that in here. I can also, and I'm sure you got this from the training that I made you do, but you can change the display and this export to traveling library is what lets you take all of the references that are in your current document, not necessarily in your library, on your desktop and share it with somebody else. Okay, the other thing that you can do from here is you can actually edit the library reference. So let's say I realize that I got this name wrong and it should have been the full name, right, instead of an initial. So I can go in here and save this, Control S. EndNote usually asks me to save it when I leave, because I Control S. And then when I go here to update citations and bibliography, I won't show it because I'm in the wrong formatting style, but it would update these. So the other nice thing about EndNote is that you can change the citation format in the blink of an eye, which is amazing because you know, sometimes you do a bunch of these. I'm just going to drag this over here, and there's a space between them, so I'm going to delete it. You'll notice these are side by side, and what I really want them to do is be in the same bubble. And so generally if you put them side by side, it just depends on what citation format you're using. You can update the citations in bibliography, and it'll smoosh them together the way that you want them to be. So obviously you already know this from the training, but EndNote gives you this sort of citation style, or formatted bibliography. And this is actually not forthcoming anymore, and so I can go in here and I can edit this one. So I want to edit the reference, and I'm going to take out where it says forthcoming here, because it just got pushed through. Control S. And I'm going to close it and go back to my document. And what I want to do here is update. And so you can see the forthcoming went away. It's not listed here anymore. And that's how you can go back. And when you see these sometimes written out, you think, okay, this actually doesn't look like I meant for it to look like. And so you can go back and change what it is that's wrong with it. I mentioned in passing that when you have a particular type of author, like here I have care, and I want care to be the organization name and not for it to think that it's the last name. And so to do that, you just need to put the comma after the full name of the organization. Now this works for everything, even really long names. So here I have the UNHCR, but if I had written, I'm just gonna, well, here you can see it's in the editor. I wrote a comma after United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. If I wrote it here, putting the comma after will make the entire reference United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. What I normally do in the in-text citation is that I just use the abbreviation here, and I'll usually write the full name in the institution bin, only because some of these organizations, like UNHCR Innovation Service, have really long names, and so I don't want to spell them out. I'm not going to say that. So that is how I use EndNote. I also mentioned that in these PDFs, you can see this little arrow thing here. You can open it up and you can read it. You can actually use the highlighter in here to highlight certain parts of this and save that. Now I'm going to wonder later why that was highlighted. And then you'll see it saves it here. You can also download these so they're not stuck in EndNote forever. It lets you print it and you can email it to your research partners that you're working with. So nothing's ever trapped forever here. And all of this can be synced, even your PDFs, because Odoo gives us quite a bit of space in that. So that is sort of your rundown on how you can change these. And you can edit and manage these in all different kinds of ways. So I can have both of these together. Now you'll see it shows up in this big long one parentheses because I smushed them together. And the last thing that you can do is, so sometimes you're sharing this document with somebody who does not have EndNote, and if they don't need to edit it, if they don't need to change it, I would consider just sharing it as a PDF so that they can't mess with any of the citations, because if they open this Word document, these are going to be fields. You can see it turns gray when I click on it. That means that they can change it. And what I find a lot of people trying to do is they go down here, and this is a field. You see it turns gray. You can't change it here. And so people will go in and they think they're editing something and they'll be like, no, this should be Erica, right? And what happens is it looks fine, but then when they save it, it updates the citations, and that's a field, so it's always going to change back because EndNote is telling you what that should be. So if somebody doesn't need to be editing this and they're just supposed to be looking at it, I would send it as a PDF. But if they do need to be editing it and they're not going to use EndNote, you can actually convert this to plain text. So you don't want to do unformatted. Unformatted actually turns this into a bunch of code, computer code. If you convert it to plain text, it basically says that, I haven't saved this, but you can, it'll create basically a new document. So it'll create a new document where, I don't even know where that's going. None of those are fields. Oops, I didn't like it anyway. And so basically once you convert to text, and I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to save this somewhere, but then you can edit these, but you also can't update them. They're no longer linked to your EndNote library. They're simply the text of what you provided. Okay, so I think that's all. Here, the export to EndNote lets you take, so let's say your research partner wrote something, they're co-writing an article or chapter with you and they did all this stuff in EndNote, but you don't have those references. You can actually put all of these EndNote, the traveling EndNote library is what comes with the document. You can actually take all of those and put them into your EndNote library, which helps you manage them yourself. So I think that's it for EndNote. It was like almost as long as the training that you had to take. I hope that helps. And if not, please feel free to ask me questions, or better yet, ask your librarian questions.